Happening now, breaking news, quote, real starvation. President Trump speaks out on the hunger crisis in Gaza and distances himself from the Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu as aid begins to enter the enclave, at least a bit of it. Welcome to our viewers here in the United States and around the world. I'm Wolf Blitzer. Pamela Brown is off today, and you're in the Situation Room.
This is CNN Breaking News.
And we begin with the breaking news. President Trump has been meeting with the British Prime Minister Keir Starmer. And in wide-ranging comments, the men discuss the global crises unfolding this morning. The president gives Russia a new deadline in its war on Ukraine. And both men call on a global response to try to alleviate the starvation crisis that is sweeping across Gaza. Listen.
We've had the opportunity to talk about the situation in Gaza and the intolerable situation, including images of starvation. And I think both of us know that we have to get to that ceasefire and we have to increase humanitarian aid in.
It's great to hear you feel the same way that I do. We have to help on a humanitarian basis before we do anything. We have to get the kids fed.
CNN Chief National Affairs Correspondent Jeff Zeleny is on the ground for us in Scotland. Jeff, it's clear that this humanitarian crisis in Gaza is a key focus of their discussions that are unfolding now. What else can you tell us?
Well, if it absolutely was, of course, those images from Gaza are gripping the world, and British Prime Minister Keir Starmer really was succinct in his language. He called it revolting, and he said it's revolting the British people and indeed the world. And one of his key points of meeting the American president here, as he has effectively been on a mix of a golfing trip and a diplomatic trip, was to press Donald Trump to increase the pressure on Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu for a ceasefire. That was one of the overarching purposes of this meeting. Now, we watched live as this conversation unfolded at the Trump Turnberry golf course for more than an hour, and that was one of the sharpest exchanges, certainly. And the president, the American president, saying that he believes that Netanyahu must do more about this, but also, Wolf, an interesting rebuke. He said the images show starvation of children. He said you can't fake that. Of course, that comes directly in contradiction to what Netanyahu said over the weekend, that he did not believe that some of these images were real. So clearly, the prime minister trying to bring the president on board here to join the voices of so many to condemn, but also to bring action and food. And Donald Trump announced food centers. He said that will be a setup, and noted that the Americans have already given some $60 million in food aid, although he said it's an open question how much of it has actually reached the starving Gazans.
The president, Jeff, also demanded a lasting ceasefire in Russia's war against Ukraine. Tell us about that.
Well, if that was also very striking, President Trump clearly voicing his frustration at Vladimir Putin. He had given him 50 days to effectively stop the war, stop the bombing on Ukraine. The bombing has only intensified, so the president changed his language, and he said he will give 10 to 12 days before issuing a stark sanction and tariff. He explained it like this.
Look, I was tough on Putin because I was the one that closed up Nord Stream, and Biden came along and opened it up. I was very tough on Putin in one way, but we got along very well. And I never really thought this would happen. I thought we'd be able to negotiate something, and maybe that'll still happen, but it's very late down the process. So I'm disappointed.
So the disappointment there is clear in the president's language, but he promised, of course, that he could bring an end to the Ukraine-Russia war if he was elected president. That has absolutely not happened, as we can see, but definitely a major development there. If he holds to this 10 to 12-day deadline, new sanctions could be coming soon. Wolf?
We shall see. All right, Jeff Zeleny, thank you very, very much. Also this morning, the Palestinian Health Ministry says 14 people have died from starvation and malnutrition in Gaza in just the last 24 hours. Israel is now resuming what it's calling a tactical pause. that opens routes for funneling aid into parts of the enclave. International pressure is clearly building big time on the Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, who claims there is, quote, no hunger crisis or starvation in Gaza. Listen.
There is no starvation in Gaza. We enable humanitarian aid throughout the duration of the war to enter Gaza. Otherwise, there would be no Gazans.
This morning, President Trump was asked if he believed the denials of a hunger crisis, denials expressed by Netanyahu. Listen.
I don't know. I mean, based on television, I would say not particularly, because those children look very hungry. But we're giving a lot of money and a lot of food, and other nations are now stepping up.
I want to go to CNN's Jeremy Diamond. He's on the ground for us in Jerusalem. Jeremy, so where do relief efforts stand today?
Well, Wolf, we are seeing a significant uptick in terms of the number of trucks getting into Gaza, and also in terms of Israel lifting many of the restrictions that they have kept in place for months in Gaza that led us to this exact situation of starvation in the Gaza Strip. But much more still needs to be done, according to United Nations officials, in order to actually alleviate the starvation that is happening in Gaza. We have now seen that the Israeli military is implementing these, quote, tactical pauses for 10 hours per day in 3 different areas of the Gaza Strip. That is facilitating, it would seem, the United Nations efforts to pick up truckloads of aid that have crossed into the Gaza Strip and then be able to actually distribute them inside of Gaza. But we are still seeing that the number of trucks that are going into Gaza are still very, very small, especially compared to the enormous need. We know that yesterday about 120 truckloads of aid were delivered into the Gaza Strip. Many of those trucks, however, Wolf, were indeed looted as crowds of thousands of hungry Palestinians crowded around those trucks and ultimately looted them. It speaks, of course, to the desperation that we are seeing on the ground, as the World Food Program now assesses that a quarter of Gaza's population is now experiencing famine-like conditions. The United Nations is welcoming these latest steps by the Israeli military to loosen some of these restrictions in Gaza that are facilitating the distribution of aid, but they say that it needs to continue going forward in order to ensure that the thousands of trucks that are actually needed in Gaza actually get distributed. What is clear, Wolf, is that even as some of these restrictions are being lifted, more people are continuing to die in Gaza and likely will continue to die in the coming days. In just the last 24 hours, 14 people have died of starvation. That brings us to 77 people who have died in Gaza of starvation just this month. Wolf.
And Jeremy, before I let you go, what can you tell us about this leading Israeli human rights group that is now accusing Israel of committing a genocide in Gaza?
Well, listen, Wolf, this is a very, very significant announcement because it comes from B'Tselem, which is the leading human rights organization here in Israel. And after months of review of the available evidence, not only of the impacts of Israeli military actions in the Gaza Strip, but also the statements that we have heard from Israeli leaders talking about the kind of annihilation of the population of Palestinians in Gaza, they have concluded, based on their assessment, that Israel is committing a genocide in the Gaza Strip. They are not the first human rights organization to conclude that. We have heard similar statements in the past from Amnesty International, for example, which drew a similar conclusion last year. Israel, of course, categorically denies that it is committing a genocide in Gaza, insisting that it is carrying out a legitimate military operation in the Gaza Strip that they say aligns with international law. Wolf.
All right, Jeremy Diamond reporting from Jerusalem for us. Thank you very, very much.